Elara Vance lived by the whispers. Not the kind that scurried through hushed rooms or darted behind cupped hands, but the ancient, gentle murmurs of the world around her. She lived in Oakhaven, a village so old its cobblestones remembered the tread of forgotten kings, nestled at the very hem of the whispering woods. Her cottage, small and sturdy, was tucked just where the last garden gnome stood guard before the trees grew tall and thick, a sentinel on the border between cultivated charm and wild magic. By profession, Elara was a cartographer of the less-traveled path. While others mapped roads and rivers, she charted the elusive, the meandering deer trails, the secret dells where the moonflowers bloomed only once a decade, the precise spot where the first spring snowdrop pushed through the frost. Her maps weren't just lines and labels. They were tapestries of feeling, woven with the scent of pine needles, the sound of a hidden waterfall, the quiet reverence of a place untouched. She knew the whispering woods better than anyone, or so she thought, listening to its every sigh and rustle. Every morning Elara would rise with the first blush of dawn, not to an alarm, but to the soft chorus of robins and the gentle creak of the ancient oak outside her window. She'd brew a pot of strong chamomile tea, infused with lavender from her own garden, and carry it to her sun-drenched nook. There, amidst stacks of parchment, half-finished sketches, and an assortment of compasses and magnifying glasses, she would sit and simply listen. Today, however, the whispers were different. For weeks, a new note had woven itself into the familiar symphony of the forest. It wasn't the wind, not exactly. Nor was it the rustle of leaves or the chirping of unseen birds. It was softer, more resonant, almost like a hum beneath the breath of the world. It was a single, sustained note, a low, melodic wish-she, like silk sliding over stone, or a secret being shared with the very air. Elara had tried to dismiss it, attributing it to a trick of the wind or an overactive imagination. But it persisted, growing subtly stronger each day, like a faint beacon calling to her deepest sense of wonder. It seemed to emanate from a specific quadrant of the woods, the oldest, wildest part, where the trees grew so densely that even in midday, shadows clung to the forest floor like velvet cloaks. A part of the woods she had, surprisingly, never fully mapped. She traced the area on an old master chart with a calloused finger. This section was marked simply as the silent grove on her earlier, less adventurous maps, a place where local legends spoke of lost voices and forgotten songs. She'd always respected its quietude, never pushing her way in, waiting for an invitation. Perhaps, she mused, this persistent whisper was the invitation. A thrill, gentle and warm, shivered through her. This was the kind of mystery that set her cartographer's heart alight. It wasn't about finding a treasure or solving a riddle in the conventional sense. It was about discovering a new facet of the world, a hidden truth whispered into the very fabric of existence. After her tea, Elara began her preparations. She donned her sturdy leather boots, worn soft from countless forest walks, and her favorite forest green jacket, its pockets already filled with useful trinkets. Her satchel, made of thick canvas, was packed with her essentials. A fresh roll of parchment, her favorite ink made from oak galls, a quiver of perfectly sharpened pencils, a compass that had once belonged to her adventurous grandmother, and a small, leather-bound journal for observations. A thermos of hot lemon balm tea and a few oat biscuits completed her provisions. As she stepped out of her cottage, the morning air was crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming honeysuckle. The sun, still low, cast long, benevolent rays through the trees, making the dew-kissed leaves sparkle like a million tiny jewels. She paused at the edge of her garden, taking a deep, fortifying breath, her senses already attuned to the forest's heartbeat. The path she chose was one she knew intimately, winding through a grove of silver birches whose bark peeled like ancient scrolls. Each step was deliberate, a conversation with the earth beneath her feet. She listened for the whisper, allowing it to guide her, a subtle magnetic pull in the core of her being. Soon, the familiar path gave way to less trodden ground. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead to form a natural cathedral. The light became dappled, shifting, painting moving patterns on the moss-covered rocks and fallen logs. The air grew cooler, carrying the rich, earthy smell of ancient soil and decaying leaves. Here the everyday sounds of Oak Haven faded into a distant hum, replaced by the symphony of the wild. The whisper grew clearer now, a sustained, almost melodic tone that seemed to pulse from the very heart of the woods. It wasn't a sound that hurt the ears or caused alarm. Rather, it was deeply soothing, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Elara felt a peculiar sense of homecoming, as if this sound had always been waiting for her to find it. She pushed deeper, past gnarled hawthorn bushes and ferns that brushed against her legs like soft fingers. Her internal compass, honed by years of practice, told her she was heading into the silent grove, the place marked with a simple question mark on her earlier maps. The trees here were truly ancient, their trunks wider than her outstretched arms, their bark fissured and craggy, adorned with emerald moss and silver gray lichen. They felt like silent witnesses to centuries of secrets. Finally, the trees began to thin slightly, revealing a clearing. But it wasn't an open, sunny space. Instead, it was a place of profound stillness, dominated by a cluster of immense smooth stones. They stood in a rough circle, their surfaces worn smooth by aeons of wind and rain, their tops reaching towards the sky like forgotten monoliths. Each stone hummed with the same low, resonant whisper that had drawn her here, as if the sound originated from within the very rock itself. In the center of the stone circle, a spring bubbled up from the earth, its water crystal clear and astonishingly cold. The spring fed a tiny, iridescent pool, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the dappled canopy above like a dark mirror. And around the pool, growing in vibrant profusion, were flowers Elara had never seen before. They were small, bell-shaped, and glowed with a faint, ethereal luminescence, their petals shifting between shades of amethyst and sapphire. They seemed to pulse in time with the whisper. Elara approached slowly, her heart thrumming with a mixture of awe and reverence. This was more than just a hidden dell. It was a sanctuary, a place imbued with an almost palpable sense of peace and ancient power. The whisper was loudest here, enveloping her, seeping into her very bones. It felt like a memory, a story being told without words. She carefully set down her satchel and pulled out her journal and a fresh sheet of parchment. She began to sketch, her pencil flying across the page, trying to capture the subtle glow of the flowers, the monumental silence of the stones, the mirrored surface of the pool. She tried to transcribe the whisper too, using a series of undulating lines and symbols, knowing that no written word could truly convey its essence. As she leaned closer to one of the luminous flowers, captivated by its delicate beauty, her gaze fell upon something nestled at its base. It was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, no larger than her thumb. Its wings were spread as if in mid-flight, and its tiny, smooth head was tilted as if listening. It was clearly old, its wood weathered to a soft, silvery gray, but exquisitely preserved by the unique atmosphere of the grove. She picked it up gently, her thumb tracing the delicate curve of its wing. It felt warm, almost alive, in her palm. The carving was so detailed, so full of character, that it felt like a tiny piece of someone's heart. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a connection, a silent message from another soul. As she turned the bird over, her fingers brushed against something almost imperceptible, carved into its underside. A single, elegant letter. A soft rustle from the ancient ferns behind her made her jump, her heart leaping into her throat. She spun around, the little wooden bird clutched tightly in her hand. Standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the shadows of a gnarled oak, was a man. He was tall, with a lean, strong build that spoke of days spent outdoors. His clothes were practical and unassuming, a dark forest green jacket similar to hers, sturdy trousers, and worn leather boots. But it was his eyes that captured her attention. They were the color of deep moss, framed by faint lines that hinted at a life lived under an open sky. His dark hair was a little long, falling across his forehead in a way that suggested he cared little for conventional grooming. A faint scar, thin as a whisper itself, traced a path above his left eyebrow. He stood perfectly still, like a deer caught in a moment of indecision, his gaze fixed on her. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the gentle, rhythmic whish of the grove, which suddenly seemed to resonate with a new, sharper awareness. Elara felt a flush creep up her neck. She, the quiet cartographer, had stumbled into a secret, and perhaps into someone else's territory. "Hello," she managed, her voice a little breathy, surprising herself with its steadiness. The man didn't move immediately. His eyes, however, softened almost imperceptibly as they flickered from her face to the small wooden bird still clutched in her hand. "You found it," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle, like the turning of smooth stones in a riverbed. It carried the faint scent of the forest, of damp earth and pine. I did," Elara replied, holding out the bird instinctively. "Is it yours?" He took a slow step forward, emerging fully into the dappled light. He was even taller than she first thought, and there was a quiet strength about him that was both reassuring and a little intimidating. He reached out a hand, his fingers long and calloused, and gently took the bird from her. He turned it over, his thumb tracing the aura carved on its underside, a faint, almost melancholic smile touching his lips. "It was my grandfather's," he said, his gaze distant for a moment, lost in memory. "He carved it, lost it years ago, or so we thought." He looked up at her, his moss-green eyes meeting hers, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher passing between them. Curiosity? Recognition? "I'm Elara Vance," she offered, feeling the need to explain her presence. "I map the woods, the less obvious parts. I heard a whisper. It led me here." She gestured vaguely at the monolithic stones and the luminous flowers. He nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over her satchel, her open journal, and the partially sketched map. A flicker of understanding crossed his face. "The Whispering Grove," he murmured, his eyes lingering on the symbols she had drawn to represent the sound. "You hear it too, then?" It wasn't a question but a statement of shared experience. "Yes," she confirmed, a sense of relief washing over her. She wasn't imagining it. "It's beautiful. What is it?" He shifted his weight, his eyes returning to the carved bird in his hand. "Some say it's the song of the earth, breathing. Others say it's the echoes of old magic, or the lament of forgotten spirits." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "My family, we call it the voice of the heartstone. It's what keeps this place alive and these flowers blooming." He gestured to the glowing blossoms. "Heartstone?" Elara whispered, intrigued. "It's buried deep beneath this spring," he explained, his voice hushed, as if sharing a sacred secret. "A crystal, they say, that draws energy from the moon and stars, and whispers it into the land." He finally returned his gaze to her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "And you, Elara Vance, are the first person in many, many years to find your way here, guided by its song." His words sent a strange warmth through her, a recognition that felt deeper than mere acquaintance. She found herself utterly captivated by him, by his quiet wisdom and the gentle way he spoke of the grove. "I'm Rowan," he offered, as if sensing her unspoken question. "Rowan Thorne. My family has been tied to this place for generations. We look after it." "It's an honor to meet you, Rowan," Elara said, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "This place is extraordinary, and your grandfather's bird is lovely. I can see why he'd carve something so delicate for such a place." Rowan's thumb caressed the wooden bird again. He loved this grove more than anything. He believed the whispers carried messages, not just from the earth, but from those who are no longer with us. He used to sit here for hours, just listening. He paused, then looked directly at Elara, a faint spark of curiosity in his eyes. "You seem to understand that kind of listening." Elara felt a blush rise again, but this time it was a blush of pleasure. "I try," she admitted softly. "The world has so much to say, if we only take the time to hear it." He nodded, a silent affirmation. "Indeed." He then extended his hand, the wooden bird resting in his open palm. "Thank you for finding this, Elara. It means a great deal." She took the bird, her fingers brushing his. It was a brief touch, but a jolt, like static electricity, passed between them. A warmth spread through her hand, and for a moment, the whisper in the grove seemed to swell, a little louder, a little clearer, as if celebrating their connection. "Keep it," Rowan said, his gaze unwavering. "A token, for finding your way here, and for hearing what others cannot." Elara stared at him, then at the bird. "Are you sure?" He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his features, erasing the lines of wariness and revealing a profound kindness. Very. Perhaps it was meant for you to find all along. He then turned his head, his eyes scanning the ancient trees at the edge of the clearing. The sun is starting to dip. It's not wise to be in this part of the woods after dark, unless you know the paths like the back of your hand. His tone was not dismissive, but gently cautionary. Elara glanced at the sky. He was right. The light was indeed beginning to soften, painting the canopy in hues of orange and purple. She suddenly realized how long she had been here, lost in wonder. "You're right, of course," she said, gathering her things. "I should head back." She carefully placed the wooden bird in a secure pocket of her satchel. Rowan watched her, then took a step back towards the shadows, his presence already beginning to blend with the forest around them. "Perhaps," he said, his voice a low invitation that resonated with the grove's own whisper, "you might consider returning. There's much more to learn about the whispers and this place, if you're inclined." Elara paused, her heart leaping with a quiet excitement. "I would be very inclined, Rowan Thorne," she said, meeting his gaze with a promise in her eyes. "Very inclined indeed." He offered another small, knowing smile, then turned and melted back into the shadows of the ancient oak, becoming one with the forest as silently and gracefully as he had appeared. Elara stood there for a long moment, the scent of pine and damp earth filling her lungs, the whisper of the grove still enveloping her. The luminous flowers glowed, the ancient stones hummed, and the memory of Rowan's moss-green eyes and gentle smile lingered in her mind. She had come seeking a whisper, and she had found not only its source, but a connection to a mystery far deeper and more compelling than she could have imagined. As she began her walk back towards Oakhaven, the small wooden bird nestled safely in her pocket. She felt a profound sense of anticipation. The whispering woods had revealed a new secret, and with it, a new path, not just on her map, but in her heart. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would be back. Elara's steps back through the fading light of the woods were lighter than her steps in. The initial apprehension had melted away, replaced by a quiet hum of excitement. The air, crisp and cool, no longer felt menacing but invigorating. The trees, though still ancient and watchful, seemed to nod in gentle acknowledgement rather than loom in silent judgment. She ran a thumb over the smooth, cool wood of the bird in her pocket, its presence a comforting weight against her thigh. It felt like a tiny, tangible secret, a promise whispered only to her. She thought of the man. His eyes, the color of moss after a rain, had held an ancient wisdom, a profound stillness that had both intrigued and calmed her. His hands, calloused and strong, had moved with such delicate precision as he carved. She hadn't caught his name, nor offered her own, a strange omission in an encounter that felt so deeply significant. He was a part of the woods, as much as the ancient oaks and the winding streams. His quiet intensity, the way he seemed to listen to the very air, had left an indelible mark. As the tree line thinned and the first twinkling lights of Oakhaven appeared through the twilight, Elara felt a pang of reluctance. The village, charming as it was, felt distant from the magic she had just experienced. She was a travel writer, currently on assignment to document the hidden gems of the region, and Oakhaven, with its quaint cottages and artisanal shops, was meant to be merely a stop on her journey. But now, it felt like a gateway, a temporary pause before she could return to the true heart of her quest. Her cottage, a small whitewashed dwelling with a rose-trellised porch, welcomed her with its familiar warmth. She lit the lamps, chasing away the encroaching shadows, and placed the wooden bird carefully on her bedside table. Its delicate form seemed to glow faintly in the soft light, a silent sentinel. She traced its smooth curve, the intricate carvings of its wings. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a key, she felt, to something profound. Sleep came easily that night, but it was not a deep, forgetful slumber. Instead, Elara dreamt of ancient trees that whispered secrets on the wind, of hands that carved stories into wood, and of eyes that held the quiet wisdom of the forest. She awoke with a sense of purpose, a magnetic pull towards the woods that was stronger than any journalistic assignment. The next few days in Oakhaven were a blur of half-hearted exploration. She visited the local bakery, sampling its famous apple tarts, and browsed the small antique shop, but her mind kept drifting back to the towering trees and the enigmatic man. She found herself sketching the wooden bird in her notebook, trying to capture its essence, the feeling it evoked. She spoke to Mrs. Gable, the kindly owner of the village guest house, about the whispering woods. Ah, the woods, Mrs. Gable had said, her eyes twinkling. They say it holds old magic. Locals don't venture too deep. Too many stories, you know, lost travelers, spirits of the forest. But some say there's a good kind of magic there too, if you know how to listen. She paused, then added conspiratorially. There's a man lives out there, or so I've heard. A recluse, keeps to himself. Some say he's a wizard, others just a hermit. He carves beautiful things, they say, from the wood of the forest. Elara's heart had quickened. A carver? She had asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Mrs. Gable nodded. Indeed. Never seen him myself, mind you. But the children sometimes find his carvings left on their doorsteps, little birds or animals, if they've been kind to the forest. A bit of a mystery, he is. A mystery indeed. Elara felt a thrill of confirmation. It was him. He wasn't just a fleeting vision. He was a living legend, intertwined with the very fabric of the woods. Her assignment, once a clear path, now felt like a distraction. She was supposed to be writing about the Dharma of Oakhaven, not its mysteries. But the mystery had claimed her imagination, her heart. She knew she couldn't leave without understanding more, without seeing him again. On the fourth morning after her first encounter, Elara packed a small bag, water, a sketchbook, a few energy bars. She dressed in sturdy walking boots and practical clothes, ready for a longer trek. The wooden bird, she decided, would stay safely in her cottage. This time she wasn't seeking a specific whisper. She was seeking a conversation, a connection. The path into the woods felt more familiar now, less daunting. She followed the winding trail, her senses acutely aware of every rustle, every scent. The air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy smell of damp soil and ancient leaves. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. She listened for the unique cadence of a woodcarver's tools, for any sign of his presence. She walked deeper than before, past the fallen log where she'd first rested, past the grove of gnarled oaks. The woods grew quieter, the sounds of Oakhaven fading into a distant memory. She found herself at a small clearing, hidden from the main path by a thick curtain of ferns and wild roses. In the center stood a small, rustic cabin, built from rough-hewn timber and nestled seamlessly into its surroundings. A thin wisp of smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney. A figure was seated on a wooden stool outside the cabin, back to her, intent on something in his hands. It was him. Her heart leaped, a joyous flutter against her ribs. She hesitated, unsure how to approach, how to break the profound silence that seemed to emanate from him and his dwelling. Then, as if sensing her presence, he slowly lowered his hands, revealing a half-finished bird, and turned. His moss-green eyes met hers, and a slow, gentle smile touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It was a smile that reached his eyes, full of quiet warmth and a hint of welcome. "I thought you might return," he said, his voice a low rumble like the murmur of the forest itself. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck. "How did you know?" He gestured vaguely at the trees. "The woods tell me things. And," he added, his gaze softening, "your heart was too open to leave a mystery unsolved." He stood, his movements unhurried and graceful, and gestured towards a second stool opposite him. "Please, sit." Elara sat, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and profound ease. I came to understand more. About the whisper. About the birds." She didn't mention the gossip in Oakhaven, the wizard or hermit labels. She wanted to know Heiming, not the stories about him. He picked up the half-carved bird. "The whisper," he began, his gaze distant, "is the voice of the forest. It speaks of balance, of life, of memory. Most have forgotten how to listen. They hear only the wind, the rustle of leaves. But it's more than that. It's the song of the earth, the stories of the ancient trees, the wisdom passed down through seasons." He turned the bird in his hands. "These," he said, "are my attempt to capture a fragment of that whisper, to make it tangible, so that others might feel its echo, even if they can't yet hear its full song." You leave them for children, Elara ventured, remembering Mrs. Gable's words. He nodded. Children are closer to the whisper. Their hearts are still open. They understand magic instinctively. They cherish what is given freely without expectation. And the one you gave me? Elara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Was I kind to the forest? His smile widened. You listened. You didn't demand. You respected its silence. And you carried a question in your heart, a genuine curiosity. That is kindness enough. He introduced himself then. My name is Silas. Elara, she replied, feeling a warmth spread through her. It's good to finally know your name, Silas. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the chirping of unseen birds, and the gentle carving sounds as Silas resumed his work. Elara watched his hands, mesmerized by their skill, the way the wood shavings curled away from the blade, revealing the bird's form beneath. She pulled out her sketchbook and began to draw him, capturing the lines of his face, the intensity of his focus, the serene backdrop of the cabin and the woods. You're an artist, he observed without looking up, his voice a quiet affirmation. A writer, mostly, she corrected. But I sketch what moves me. And this place, it's all very moving. He chuckled softly. The woods have a way of doing that. He finished a delicate curve on the bird's wing and held it up. Almost done. A robin, I think. It's beautiful, Elara said, genuinely admiring the lifelike quality. Each one is different, isn't it? Each tree is different, each branch, each moment in the forest, Silas replied. So too are the whispers. No two are ever quite the same. He looked at her, his eyes serious now. Why did you truly come back, Elara? Beyond the birds, beyond the whisper? The directness of his question surprised her, but she found herself unable to prevaricate. I felt a connection to you, to the peace you seem to embody here. In my world, everything moves so fast, so much noise. This place and you feel like an anchor. She paused, feeling vulnerable but also strangely liberated. I suppose I wanted to see if that connection was real or just a fleeting impression. Silas put down the carving tool. He looked at her, a long, searching gaze that seemed to peel back layers, seeing into her soul. It is real, he said simply. I felt it too, a resonance like two old roots finally finding each other beneath the soil. His words sent a shiver down her spine, a warm, comforting shiver. It was a poetic way of expressing a profound truth. Do you ever feel lonely out here? Elara asked, wondering about his solitary existence. He considered her question. Sometimes, but the forest is my companion. It speaks to me and I to it, and now, perhaps I have another. He offered a small, hesitant smile. But the silence is also a friend. It allows me to hear. He picked up a small, uncarved block of wood, smooth and pale. Would you like to try? He asked, extending a small carving knife. To feel the wood, to listen to what it wants to become. Elara hesitated. She had never carved before. Her tools were pens and cameras, not blades. I wouldn't know where to begin. Begin with listening, Silas encouraged, his eyes gentle. Feel the grain, imagine what is hidden within, don't force it, let the wood guide your hand. She took the knife, surprisingly light in her hand, and the block of wood. The wood was cool and smooth, faintly scented with pine. She held it, turning it over, feeling its weight, its texture. Silas sat beside her, offering quiet guidance, his presence a comforting warmth. Start with a gentle cut, away from you, he instructed, demonstrating with his own piece. Just to remove the outer layer, to reveal the heart of the wood. Elara made a tentative cut. The wood resisted slightly, then yielded, a thin shaving curling away. It was surprisingly satisfying. She tried another, and another, slowly finding a rhythm. It wasn't about making something perfect, she realized, but about the process, the connection to the material, the quiet focus it demanded. They carved in companionable silence for a long time, the only sounds the soft scraping of blades against wood, the rustle of leaves, and the distant call of a cuckoo. Elara found herself losing track of time, her mind quieted, her worries about deadlines and assignments fading into the background. She wasn't creating a masterpiece, but a simple, rounded form, a smooth pebble of wood. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long, golden shadows through the trees, Silas gently took her unfinished piece. "A good start," he praised, his voice warm. "You have a natural touch, Alara. You listen well." He then took his own half-finished robin and carefully carved a tiny, intricate feathered detail onto its wing. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. "A reminder of the whisper and of this day." Alara took the robin, its delicate features a stark contrast to her own rough-hewn piece. This one felt even more special than the first. "Thank you, Silas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect." "The first one was a welcome," he explained. "This one is an invitation to return, to learn more." "I wish," she confirmed, her gaze meeting his, a silent promise passing between them. She felt a deep sense of contentment, a profound peace she hadn't known she was missing until now. The woods, once a place of mystery, now felt like a sanctuary, and Silas, its quiet guardian, felt like a kindred spirit she had somehow always known. As she prepared to leave, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Alara felt a renewed sense of purpose, not for her writing, but for her heart. She knew her journey in Oakhaven was far from over. It had only just begun. The path leading out of the clearing towards the village no longer felt like a retreat, but a temporary departure, an inevitable return. With the new robin clutched gently in her hand, its tiny wooden heart beating a silent rhythm against her palm, she carried not just a carving, but a piece of the woods and a piece of Silas with her. The whisper, she realized, was not just a sound. It was a feeling, a connection, a burgeoning hope. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would be back, drawn by the irresistible call of the woods, and the man who held its ancient secrets. The journey back down the winding gravel path felt different now. The air, though still crisp and sweet with the scent of pine and damp earth, held a new kind of resonance. Alara clutched the tiny robin in her palm, its smooth, cool wood a tangible link to the man she'd just left and the world he inhabited. The world she suddenly felt an inexplicable pull towards. Each step away from the heart of the woods was a step towards her familiar life, but it no longer felt like a return to comfort, but rather a departure from something vital. As her small car finally bumped onto the paved road, the greens of the forest began to thin, replaced by manicured lawns and the distant hum of traffic. The transition was jarring. The quiet of the woods, a silence so profound it felt like a presence, was replaced by the cacophony of the city. Horns blared, sirens wailed in the distance, and the relentless thrum of human activity pressed in on her. She found herself subconsciously tightening her grip on the robin, as if to ward off the encroaching noise and keep a piece of the quiet close. Back in her small, sun-drenched apartment, nestled amongst towering buildings, Alara found the familiar surroundings strangely muted. Her vibrant canvases, her collection of vintage cameras, the overflowing bookshelves, all things that usually spark joy and inspiration, now seemed to shimmer with a faint unreality. The robin sat on her bedside table, a tiny sentinel guarding the memories of ancient trees and quiet smiles. She tried to slip back into her routine. She developed the rolls of film from her trip, the forest scenes emerging on the light table with a breathtaking clarity. Each photograph, a testament to the dappled light, the moss-covered stones, the intricate patterns of bark, brought with it a cascade of memories. She saw the way the light caught Silas's hair as he bent over a carving, the gentle curve of his calloused fingers, the thoughtful crease between his brows. The images were beautiful, but they felt incomplete, like a melody without its harmony. Days bled into a week. Alara found herself pacing her apartment, the silence here feeling hollow, not profound. She tried to work, to focus on her next commission, a series of urban landscapes, but her lens kept drifting, seeking out the wildness in the mundane, a patch of tenacious weeds pushing through cracked pavement, the intricate veins of a fallen leaf on a concrete sidewalk. She saw the world through the filter of the woods, a world that now seemed to lack the deep, resonant pulse she'd discovered. The whisper wasn't just a memory, it was a persistent current beneath the surface of her thoughts. It spoke of pine needles underfoot, the gurgle of a hidden stream, the subtle scent of wood smoke, and something uniquely Silas. She found herself replaying their conversations, his quiet observations, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He hadn't asked her to return, hadn't even suggested it, yet the certainty of her return was a steady, unwavering flame within her. One evening, staring out her window at the city lights twinkling like scattered jewels, a profound restlessness settled in her bones. The robin on her bedside table seemed to pulse with an almost imperceptible energy. It was a tangible reminder of a different kind of life, a different kind of connection. She didn't just want to see the woods again, she wanted to feeling them, to be enveloped by their quiet wisdom. And she wanted to see Silas. More than that, she felt a profound need to understand the whisper, to delve deeper into the ancient secrets he carried. The decision solidified with a quiet click. It wasn't a spontaneous whim, but an inevitable unfolding. She wasn't escaping anything in the city, she was returning to something that felt inherently right. The next morning, Alara packed a lighter bag than before. This time, her intent wasn't just a photography expedition, it was a journey of the heart. She included a small, bound sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils, a different way to capture the essence of what she found there. The robin, of course, nestled safely in her pocket. The drive back was filled with a different kind of anticipation. The familiar landmarks whizzed by, but now they felt like milestones leading her home, not away. As she left the paved road behind and turned onto the gravel path, a sigh of relief escaped her lips. The air immediately smelled richer, cleaner. The trees, denser now, formed a welcoming canopy, filtering the afternoon sun into dappled patterns on the forest floor. She parked her car in the same clearing, the silence immediately wrapping around her like a soft blanket. A nervous flutter stirred in her stomach. Would he be there? Would he remember her? Of course he would. But what would he think of her unannounced return? Taking a deep breath, she started down the winding path. The familiar crunch of leaves and twigs underfoot was a comforting rhythm. She listened for the whisper, and this time, it felt less like a distant call, and more like a gentle hum within her own spirit. Then, through a clearing in the trees, she saw it. The small, rustic cabin, nestled amongst the towering pines, a wisp of smoke curling lazily from its chimney. And there, on the small porch, was Silas. He was bent over a piece of wood, his hands moving with the same focused artistry she remembered. The late afternoon sun painted his profile in shades of gold and shadow. He hadn't seen her yet. Alara paused, a warmth spreading through her chest. This was it. This was where she was meant to be. Silas? Her voice, soft yet clear, cut through the quiet. He looked up, his movements fluid and unhurried. His eyes, the color of moss after rain, met hers, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It was a smile that reached deep, resonating with a quiet welcome. Alara, he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. He rose, dusting wood shavings from his trousers. You came back. It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of fact, devoid of surprise, as if he had always known she would. I did, she confirmed, a shy smile mirroring his. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the robin. I brought him back. Silas chuckled softly, a sound like dry leaves skittering across the forest floor. He found his way home then. He gestured towards the cabin. Come in, it's good to see you. The cabin was just as she remembered, cozy, filled with the scent of wood, and something earthy, comforting. A fire crackled merrily in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, adorned with finished and unfinished carvings. A kettle simmered on a small cast-iron stove. Tea? He offered, reaching for 2 mugs. Please. She set her bag down, feeling the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying melt away. It's peaceful here. It is, he agreed, pouring steaming herbal tea into the mugs. The woods have a way of settling the spirit. He handed her a mug, his fingers brushing hers, sending a small electric spark through her. They sat by the fire, the silence between them, comfortable, companionable. Alara told him about her week, the jarring contrast of city life, her restless nights. She spoke of how the robin had become a constant presence, a reminder. Silas listened, his gaze steady and warm, offering soft hums of understanding. "The woods call to those who listen," he said eventually, stirring his tea. "They share their secrets if you're patient enough." "I think I'm ready to listen more closely," she admitted, her gaze meeting his. "I want to understand the whisper." He smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "It's not something you can force. It comes when it's ready. Just like the trees don't rush their growth, or the river its path." Over the next few days, Alara fell into a rhythm that felt both ancient and utterly new. She spent her mornings exploring different parts of the forest with her camera, seeking out new perspectives, new light. She found hidden waterfalls, groves of ancient oaks, and sun-dappled clearings that felt untouched by time. She filled her sketchbook with quick charcoal studies, trying to capture the texture of bark, the movement of a bird's wing, the interplay of light and shadow. Silas, in turn, shared more of his world with her. He showed her how to identify different trees by their leaves and bark, how to follow animal tracks, how to find edible berries and mushrooms, cautioning her on the poisonous ones. He taught her to carve simple shapes from soft wood, guiding her hands with a gentle patience. His hands, strong and skilled, sometimes brushed hers as he demonstrated, sending a familiar warmth through her. Their conversations grew deeper. They spoke of art, his carvings, her photography. He understood her desire to capture the essence of things, the story behind the image. She understood his need to bring forth the hidden life within a piece of wood. They talked about solitude and connection, about the beauty of impermanence and the enduring strength of nature. One afternoon, they sat by the stream, watching the water tumble over smooth stones. Silas was idly carving a small smooth stone, his knife making soft scraping sounds. "Do you ever get lonely out here, Silas?" Alara asked, breaking the comfortable silence. He paused, looking up at the canopy of leaves above them. "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice soft. "But it's a different kind of loneliness. It's the quiet space where thoughts can grow. The woods are never truly empty. There's always life, always movement, always a story being told." He turned the stone over in his palm. "But," he added, his gaze meeting hers, "it's also good to share the stories, to have someone to witness them with." Alara's heart fluttered. "I feel like I'm finally seeing them, really seeing them, with you." He smiled, a deep, genuine warmth in his eyes. "That's how it should be." He handed her the stone. It was a smooth, river-worn pebble, and he had carved a tiny, perfect spiral into its surface. "For your collection," he said, a reminder of the endless path. Their evenings were spent by the fire, the scent of wood smoke mingling with the aroma of the simple meals Silas prepared. He was surprisingly adept in the kitchen, turning wild greens and foraged ingredients into delicious, nourishing dishes. Alara in turn shared stories of her travels, of the bustling city markets, the vibrant art galleries, bringing a touch of her world into his quiet one. One night, as the fire cast long, flickering shadows, Alara found herself sketching Silas as he worked on a new carving. He was focused, his brow furrowed in concentration, but a peacefulness emanated from him. He had a way of being entirely present, completely absorbed in the moment. "What are you working on tonight?" she asked softly, her charcoal moving deftly across the page. He held up a piece of oak, already beginning to take the shape of a majestic owl. "A guardian," he murmured. "For the oldest tree in the grove. It watches over the young saplings." "It's beautiful," she said, truly meaning it. His carvings weren't just objects, they felt imbued with spirit. "Do you ever carve anything that isn't from the woods?" He paused, his knife still. "Not often. The wood speaks to me here. It tells me what it wants to become." He looked at her, a hint of something unreadable in his gaze. "Though sometimes I feel a different kind of inspiration." Their eyes held for a moment, and the air between them thickened, charged with unspoken feelings. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. The whisper, she realized, wasn't just about the woods. It was about the growing connection between them, a silent language they were both learning to speak. The days blurred into a tapestry of shared moments. They walked through the woods, hand in hand sometimes, without thinking, their fingers intertwining naturally. They laughed at the antics of a curious squirrel, marveled at the intricate patterns of frost on a leaf, and shared moments of profound silence that spoke volumes. Alara found herself drawn to the comfort of Silas's presence, the quiet strength he exuded. She discovered a gentle humor beneath his solemn exterior, a playfulness that emerged in their shared moments of discovery in the forest. And Silas, she noticed, seemed to open up more around her, his quiet observations becoming more frequent, his smiles more readily given. He would watch her through the lens of her camera, a soft, amused expression on his face, as if seeing her vibrant energy reflected in the natural world. The city, with its demands and distractions, felt like a distant dream. Here, time stretched and softened, governed by the rising and setting of the sun, the rhythm of the wind through the trees. Elara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced anywhere else. It wasn't just the beauty of the woods, it was the warmth of Silas' company, the profound sense of understanding that flowed between them. One late afternoon, a soft rain began to fall, turning the forest floor into a shimmering mosaic of greens and browns. They were sitting under the shelter of an ancient sprawling oak, listening to the gentle drumming of raindrops on the leaves. "I need to leave soon," Elara said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, unwelcome. "My commission is due next week, and I have to go back to the city to process everything." Silas turned his head, his gaze tender. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet. "The world has its demands." He reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for a moment, sending a shiver down her spine. "But the woods will always be here." "And so will I," Elara replied, her voice thick with emotion. She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I'll come back, Silas. I promise." He squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of her wrist. "I know," he said, his eyes holding hers. "The whisper will guide you." That evening, as they shared a last meal by the fire, a comfortable melancholy settled over them. The thought of leaving, of returning to the city without the constant, grounding presence of Silas and the woods, felt like a wrenching separation. But it was also infused with a burgeoning hope. This wasn't an end. It was a pause, a promise. Silas, sensing her quiet sadness, rose and went to a small shelf, returning with a finished carving. It was a beautiful, intricate piece, a miniature tree, its branches reaching upwards, its roots delving deep. "For you," he said, placing it gently in her hand. A reminder that even when you feel uprooted, your roots are still there, waiting to be watered. Elara looked at the carving, then at Silas, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. Perfect." She knew as she held the tiny tree that a part of her roots had already found their way into this ancient forest, intertwining with the deep, quiet strength of Silas. The whisper was no longer a mystery. It was the echo of her own heart, calling her back, again and again, to the man who held the wood's ancient secrets and perhaps a secret piece of her own future. Elara's fingers traced the delicate lines of the tiny tree, its smooth wood warm against her skin. The moment stretched, vibrant and fragile, between them. Silas' gaze, usually so steady and knowing, held a new vulnerability, a question she couldn't quite decipher, but understood instinctively. "Silas," she began, her voice still a whisper. It means so much, more than I can say." She lifted her eyes to his, and for the first time, saw a flicker of something raw, unguarded, in their depths. It was a reflection of the profound connection she felt, a mirror to the sudden, undeniable pull towards him. He reached out, his calloused thumb gently brushing the back of her hand, sending a shiver through her. "I thought it might," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "You have roots, Elara, deeper than you know." She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe I just needed to find the right soil." A small smile touched his lips then, a rare, breathtaking sight. The forest has a way of showing you things if you listen. Over the next few days, listening became their unspoken language. They continued their work, but the nature of their interactions had subtly shifted. The shared silences were no longer merely companionable. They were imbued with a rich, unspoken understanding, a comfortable intimacy that settled around them like the forest mist. Elara found herself seeking out Silas' company even when their tasks didn't demand it. She'd bring him a thermos of hot tea during his morning rounds, or join him on his evening checks of the traps, learning the intricate rhythms of his life. He, in turn, began to linger a little longer, explaining the habits of a particular bird, pointing out a rare moss, or sharing a quiet anecdote about the forest's history. One afternoon they sat by a hidden waterfall, its spray cooling the air. Elara, sketchbook in hand, was trying to capture the ethereal play of light on the water. Silas watched her, his profile etched against the vibrant green. "You're good at that," he said, his voice soft. "It's different from architectural drawings," she admitted, sketching a fern. "Less precise, more about feeling. I work in the city. It's all straight lines and blueprints. Here, everything flows." He nodded, picking up a smooth, flat stone and skipping it across the calm pool at the base of the falls. "The forest doesn't follow blueprints. It grows where it's meant to." "And what about people?" she asked, turning to him. "Do they grow where they're meant to? Or do they force themselves into a shape that doesn't quite fit?" Silas looked at her then, his eyes deep and serious. "Some try to force it. Others wander until they find their place. And some just know. Like the old oak, its roots twisting around the river stones, finding perches where it never thought it could." Elara felt the weight of his words, a quiet resonance in her own heart. She thought of her meticulously planned life in the city, her ambitious career, the perfectly ordered apartment. It all felt so far away now, like a half-forgotten dream. Here, with Silas, surrounded by the wild, untamed beauty of the forest, she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she was missing. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose, they were walking back to the cabin after a long day tracking a mischievous deer that had been nibbling young saplings. Elara stumbled on an exposed root, and Silas's hand shot out, catching her arm. His touch was firm, steady, and lingered for a beat longer than strictly necessary. A jolt, electric and undeniable, passed between them. She looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. His eyes, usually so guarded, held a warmth that made her tremble. He didn't let go of her arm. Instead, his thumb gently stroked her skin, a feather-light touch that spoke volumes. "Careful," he murmured, his voice a little rougher than usual. I will," she managed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The air crackled with unspoken emotions, a tension that was both exquisite and terrifying. He finally released her, but the connection remained, a delicate thread woven between them. That night, sleep came slowly to Elara. She clutched the tiny wooden tree in her hand, its smooth surface a tangible reminder of the invisible bonds forming around her heart. The days melted into weeks. Elara found herself postponing her return to the city, making excuses to her increasingly bewildered boss. The forest had seeped into her soul, and Silas had seeped into her heart. They shared meals by the crackling fire, discussing everything from constellations to ancient folklore. He taught her to identify bird calls, to read the subtle signs of animal tracks, to understand the forest not just as a collection of trees, but as a living, breathing entity. She, in turn, shared stories of her city life, of art galleries and bustling cafes, bringing a touch of her world to his. He listened intently, his quiet presence a balm to her often overactive mind. One rainy afternoon they were trapped inside the cabin. Silas was mending a tear in his canvas jacket, his brow furrowed in concentration. Elara, curled up in an armchair by the window, watched the rain streak down the glass, a book unread in her lap. "Silas," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. He looked up, his needle poised. "Do you ever want to leave?" she asked, her gaze sweeping around the cozy cabin, then back to him. "See the world? Experience something different?" He considered her question, his gaze going to the window, then back to his stitching. "I've seen enough of the world to know this is where I belong," he said simply. "My roots are here. My family has been guardians of this forest for generations. It's in my blood." He paused, then looked at her, a gentle curiosity in his eyes. "Do you?" Elara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I used to think so. I had this whole life planned out. Big projects, promotions, travel. But it feels hollow now, like climbing a ladder that leads nowhere I truly want to be." She looked at the tiny tree carving, which now sat on the mantelpiece, a small sentinel watching over them. "This place, it has a way of making you question everything." Silas put down his mending. He walked over to her, stopping in front of her chair. He knelt, so their eyes were level. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof. "The forest doesn't give you answers, Alara," he said, his voice low and earnest. "It gives you space to find your own. What is it your heart is whispering now?" Her gaze searched his, seeing the depth of his understanding, the quiet strength that had drawn her in from the start. "It's whispering, home," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "It's whispering that I found a peace here I didn't know existed, and it's whispering your name." A breath hitched in Silas' throat. His hand reached out, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. The contact was electric, sending warmth blooming through her. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, seeking permission. Alara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut, a silent invitation. Slowly, carefully, Silas leaned in. His lips, soft and hesitant at first, met hers. It was a kiss that tasted of pine and rain, and the quiet promise of forever. A kiss that was both gentle and profound, a deep breath after a long journey. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but one of pure affection, of recognition, of two souls finally acknowledging their destined intertwining. When they finally broke apart, Alara's eyes were shining, and a soft, contented smile bloomed on her face. Silas' eyes held a rare tenderness, a vulnerability that made her heart ache with love. "Alara," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "Silas," she echoed, reaching up to cup his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her fingers. The moment, however, was destined to be interrupted. Her phone, which she had mostly ignored for weeks, suddenly rang from her bag, its jarring electronic melody a harsh intrusion into their quiet world. Alara flinched, pulling away slightly. The spell was broken. She saw the flicker of something akin to pain in Silas's eyes, quickly veiled. I have to get that," she said, her voice strained, already feeling the pull of the world she had temporarily escaped. It was her boss. "Alara, where on earth have you been? We need you back. The Kensington project is falling behind and your input is crucial. You're due back next week, remember?" Her boss's words were a cold splash of reality. The Kensington project. Her career. The life she had built. She stammered out a promise to be back, a vague explanation about a prolonged research trip, and hung up, her hand trembling. She looked at Silas, who had retreated slightly, his expression now guarded again. The quiet strength was still there, but beneath it, she sensed a fragile resignation. He wouldn't ask her to stay. He would never presume. "My life in the city," she said, her voice tight. "It's demanding. I have responsibilities." He simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. "I understand." But his understanding was laced with a quiet sadness that twisted her gut. The next few days were shadowed by the impending departure. Alara tried to compartmentalize, to focus on the remaining research, but her heart wasn't in it. Every shared glance with Silas, every quiet moment, felt imbued with the bittersweet taste of goodbye. She felt torn, a part of her already grieving for a future that hadn't even fully formed. Silas, true to his nature, didn't press her. He simply continued to be Silas, steady and reliable, his unspoken love a quiet comfort and a profound ache. He helped her pack her bags, his movements efficient, his face unreadable. On her last morning, the forest was shrouded in a thick mist. The air was cool and damp, and the trees dripped with dew. Alara stood on the porch, her small suitcase at her feet, looking out at the familiar, beloved landscape. Silas emerged from the cabin, carrying a thermos of hot tea and 2 mugs. He handed one to her. "Last walk?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. They walked in silence, the only sounds the crunch of their boots on the damp earth and the distant call of a bird. They reached their favorite clearing, the one with the ancient, gnarled oak tree that seemed to watch over the entire forest. Alara stopped beneath its sprawling branches, turning to face Silas. Her heart was a tangled mess of longing and fear. "I don't want to go," she blurted out, the words escaping before she could stop them. He looked at her, his eyes softening. "Then don't." "But I have to," she argued, her voice rising in frustration. "My job, my apartment, my whole life is there. I can't just abandon it all." You don't have to abandon it, Silas said, stepping closer. But you also don't have to abandon these. He gestured vaguely to the forest. To them. You're a designer, Elara. You build things. Can't you build a bridge between the two? She looked at him, truly seeing him, seeing the quiet strength in his proposal, not a demand, but an offering. A bridge? Your work. It's about beauty and function, isn't it? About creating spaces that nurture. This forest, it needs its guardians. But it also needs someone to see its beauty, to share it, to perhaps design ways to protect it, to integrate it with the modern world in a way that respects its ancient heart. Elara's mind, the architect's mind, began to whir. She thought of sustainable designs, eco-tourism, educational centers, perhaps even a remote design studio. The possibilities, once unimaginable, now bloomed before her. It wasn't about choosing one life over the other, but weaving them together, creating something new and authentic. Silas, she whispered, her voice full of wonder. You're right. I can. I can build a bridge. She looked at him, her heart overflowing. But I can't build it alone. A slow smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. He reached out, taking her hands in his. You won't have to, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. This time the kiss was deeper, full of relief and profound commitment. It was a kiss that spoke of shared futures, of roots intertwining, not just into the earth, but into each other. Elara did go back to the city, but it was with a new purpose. She negotiated a remote work arrangement, presenting innovative ideas for eco-conscious architectural projects that allowed her to spend significant time away from the urban sprawl. She started small, designing a visitor's center for a nearby nature reserve, incorporating local materials and sustainable practices. Her sketches filled with the organic lines and natural light she had come to appreciate in Silas's forest. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt sterile. She began to pack, not for a temporary trip, but for a new home. She sold her city life piece by piece, shedding the unnecessary weight, making space for the life she truly desired. And Silas? He was waiting. Not passively, but actively preparing. He began to clear a small plot near the cabin, a gentle slope overlooking a stream, for a small, sustainable structure, a studio for Elara perhaps, or a shared home. He planted wildflowers, knowing she would appreciate their vibrant colors, and reinforced the cabin's porch, imagining quiet evenings spent together. Months later, Elara returned, not as a visitor, but as a resident. She arrived in a sturdy, used Jeep, packed with her essentials, her sketchbook, and a heart brimming with anticipation. Silas met her at the edge of the forest, his quiet smile a beacon. Welcome home, he said, his eyes shining as he took her hand. Home, she repeated, the words settling into her soul with perfect ease. They built their life together, brick by quiet brick, moment by shared moment. Elara's designs began to reflect the forest's wisdom, blending human ingenuity with natural harmony. She found her calling not just in building structures, but in fostering connections between people and nature, between her past and her present, between her and Silas. Their days were filled with the rhythm of the forest. Mornings began with the scent of pine and coffee, shared over quiet breakfasts. Days were spent working, sometimes side by side, sometimes apart, Elara sketching designs in her sunlit studio, Silas patrolling the forest, ensuring its peace. Evenings brought them back together, by the fire, under a canopy of stars, sharing stories and dreams. Elara never stopped marveling at the quiet magic of Silas. He was her anchor, her steady, unshakable root. And she, in turn, became his vibrant, blossoming canopy, bringing new perspectives and a joyful energy to his ancient, peaceful world. The tiny wooden tree carving, the one Silas had given her, found its permanent place on their shared mantelpiece, a testament to the moment their paths converged. It was a symbol of roots, of belonging, of a love that was as deep and enduring as the ancient forest itself. Sometimes, when the wind whispered through the trees, Elara would hear it again, the gentle, insistent murmur that had first drawn her here. But now, it wasn't a mystery. It was the familiar, comforting echo of her own heart, singing in harmony with the forest, and with the man who held her forever. And as she drifted off to sleep each night, nestled safely in Silas's arms, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had finally found her true home, her true self, and her true love, in the heart of the Whispering Woods.